அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி 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 தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி 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 தானி பெரும் கருணை அருட்பெருஞ்சோதி.
A very good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to deliver this speech in such an auspicious day of the celebration of 199th birthday or incarnation day of Vallalar Ramalinga Adigal. Is it possible for me to share my slides?
Yes, doctor, you can share.
Thank you very much. Are you all able to see my slides?
Yes, doctor. Yes, you can see.
Okay, again, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to share my thoughts on the Sanmargam principles from the medical perspective. I am the secretary of the United Malaysian Vallalar Samarasa Satya Sutta Sanmargam Devotees Association, or known as Malaysia Vallalar Thai Kulu. And on behalf of our association, we would like to congratulate the organizers of today's event, Vallalar Universal Mission USA. I do not know the other members of your organization, but I would like to thank Prasanna and also his team for inviting me to share my experience in Sanmargam and how do I relate those experiences with the in the medical perspective. So I'll just go through some of the principles of Sutta Sanmargam, and before we try and relate them to the medical, in the medical perspective. In Sutta Sanmargam, Vallal Peruman or Ramalinga Adigal gives utmost importance to the human body. This may not be so in other margams or other spiritual practices, but as far as Vallalar is concerned, he says that we should care for our body as if it was so precious as gold itself. This human body is not to be taken for granted, and human birth is something that is so rare that it is we have to appreciate it at all time. And the human body it is within this body that we are going to experience the spiritual or the jnana that you're going to receive through the Sutta Sanmargam practice. And Vallal Peruman says that the test given to us by God is not by giving us sufferings in the form of diseases, aging, fear, nor hunger, but it is by death alone. So it is the ultimate journey of the human to, at one point of time in his this cycle of birth and rebirth, is to attain the state of deathlessness. This may be something that is not known or unknown in the medical profession or in the scientific world or the Western world, but this has been proven by Ramalinga Swamigal himself. He used his body to conduct this experiment, and he has successfully attained this deathless state of body. Vallalar says that the Sutta Sanmargam experience or anubhavam is above the neck or kandasthanatthukku mel. So it is appropriate that today for our discussion we will talk mainly about the brain and how the brain is related to the principles of Sutta Sanmargam. But the science given by Vallal Peruman, especially in terms of medical science and living healthy and balanced life, he talks about every region of our body. But for the sake of today's presentation, we will concentrate on the brain region. I have been giving a series of lecture in collaboration with Penadam Valalar Araniliyam under the guidance of Daivathiru Muthujodhiyaya, and some of you may have seen those presentations, but they all are in Tamil language, and today I try to present my lecture in English, so that the knowledge and can be given to the non-Tamil speaking audience. So there is going to be some difficulties in terms of terminology. When I presented in Tamil, I had difficulties to express the medical terminology in terms of spiritual Tamil terms, but today I'm going to have the reverse difficulty, but nevertheless I'm going to try my best. So I'm going to start by introducing, but you all may be well aware of the concept that in the Tamil Siddha tradition, they say that whatever is above is also within us. Andathil ullathu anethum pindathil ullathu. So this concept is accepted by Valalar, and the science of our body is very much related to the 5 elements or the 5 Panchabhutas, as we can see here. It is made up of the soil, the water, the fire, air, and also the ether or the space. So as we can see, the orientation of the Panchabhutas are also very connected and very related to all the chakras in our body. As we know, there are 6 chakras in our body, and the orientation of the Panchabhutas are in order of the density of each of those elements. Starting from earth. Actually, when we say earth, we are actually referring to the solids that is found in our body, and this will be followed by a less dense molecule or element, which is water, then fire, earth, and space. So this is air, and followed by space. So as you can see, all the chakras in our body are related to these 5 Panchabhutas, and also the chakras are also related to medical science in the form of various plexuses that we can find in our body. In our body, we have various types of nervous system, and one of them is known as the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic means we are not able to control this system. They just act on their own. So it is known as the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and another is the endocrine system in our body. So as you can see here, there is a correlation between the various type of plexuses in our body and also the chakra that we saw earlier. For example, we have the Muladhara chakra. This is represented as a pelvic plexus, and the control of the sexual organs, the gonads, the ovaries, testicles are at this level of the Muladhara chakra. And this is followed by the splenic plexus and the celiac plexus, and then you have the heart plexus, and also in the upper part you have the cervical ganglions or the cervical plexus. So as you can see, the Muladhara chakra, as I explained, is involved the gonads, followed by the large intestine. Then you have the small intestine, the stomach, the spleen and liver, followed by the heart. And then in the neck, you have the thyroid gland. You also have the control of the salivary gland, the pupils. All these are under the cervical ganglia. So you can see there's a very beautifully how the Panchabhutas are found in the cosmos. And as in the Tamil literature, they call this as a manmudal. That means we are formed by the soil, and whatever elements are found in the soils will be found in our body. So all the Panchabhutas are found in our body, and they are very, very nicely connected with the chakras and as well as the plexuses that you can see in our nervous system. Okay, next we're going to look at evolution. This is a song that I've got from Tolkappiyam. As you can see, the Panjabhutas again are very nicely represented in how the evolution of the various life forms that we find on Earth. It starts with organisms which have got Orarivu. That means they have only one sense organ working in them. It starts with the sense of touch, and plants will fall in under this category. This is followed by organisms that have got the sense of taste, the sense of smell, followed by vision and hearing, and finally man is created, and he has got the highest sense, which is the sense of mind or the intellect. So as you follow, the plants are seen first, and then followed by the creepies and crawlies. This will be your slug, the snails, and the worms, and then the insects will follow, followed by beetles, which have got the sense of sight. And then finally the mammals will come, and they have all the five senses, except they don't have the mind or the intellect, which is only exclusive for the humans. It is the journey of mankind to climb this final ladder from the sixth sense to acquire the seventh sense, or the Yelam Arivu, which is God's Arivu, or the God's intellect, which will be our goal in the journey of Sutta Sanmargam. The Panchabhutas, as I've said earlier, it's closely connected with many things in our body. Today I'm just going to see how they are connected with the sense organs in our body. The earth is related to the sense of smell. Water is related to the sense of taste, fire for vision, air for touch, and also the ether or agash is related to the sense of hearing. This is very extensively explained by Vallalar in the Tiruvaruppa, Arupperunjodi Agaval, and I refer the listeners to the lines verses 337 to 510. You can find a lot of details about this relationship. In medical science, however, we do not look at the body in the perspective of the Panchabhutas. There are a few ways they look at the composition of the body. One is based on the types of elements that you find in our body, and you can see this is the ratio of the various composition, starting from oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and so on. They also look at the body in terms of composition based on amount of carbohydrate, fat, protein, and water. So if you look at the medical, the Western way of thinking, I feel, it is my opinion, now that I know about the Panchabhutas, especially the three dosas, which is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, which we will speak shortly, a physician, a medical personnel, needs the understanding of the Panchabhutas. So in this aspect, the Western medicine is lacking, I would say. Similarly, for the Siddhas and Ayurveda, they also need to have a certain amount of knowledge in terms of the mechanism of physiology, anatomy, and also pathogenesis of diseases based on the modern or Western medicine. This combination or this integrated form of medicine will make a physician a complete doctor, and if one is able to combine this knowledge, and I think that doctor will be a complete one. So as I said earlier, the Panchabhutas are again represented in the three dosas that we find in our body, which is known as Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. The Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, it is closely related with Sanmargam, and if you read the prose writing of Ramalinga Adigal, which is known as the Uranare Pagadi, you especially in the Nitya Karma Vidhi, which is a prescription, I would say it's a prescription given by a doctor called Ramalingam. He has given from the point where you get up in the morning till you go back to sleep at night, what are the practices that you need to do to make sure that your body, the Vada, Pitta, Kapha, all these three dosas are in perfect harmony and balance, and only then you will be free of disease and you can lead a healthy life. So as you see, the first dosa, Panchabhuta, which is soil and water, represents Kapha. The fire will represent Pitta, and the air and space will represent Vadam in our body. Now we will look more detail into our brain, which will be actually the core part of my lecture this evening. And I will try and relate as much as possible the science of Sanmargam and also the modern science. But okay, first we start off by just having a look at the Temple of Wisdom, which is known as the Jnana Sabai, which is built by Ramalinga Adigal, Valalar in Vadalur, Tamil Nadu. He has built this temple in a very peculiar octagonal shape. So if you look at the human skull, the human brain is protected by 8 bones. The frontal bone, there are two temporal bones, there is one occipital bone, then there are sphenoid bones. So in total, there are 8 bones, and exactly this corresponds with the 8 octagonal shape of the Jnana Sabai. Next, we look at what is known as the Pagara Vari. This is a letter Pa in the Tamil language, which appears, as you can see, here it appears to be the Pituitary Fossa in our brain. This is actually a cross section of our brain, which we call it a sagittal section. What we have done is just split the skull right in the middle and break it into 2 halves. So you can see this cross section area, this appearance of the Pituitary Fossa is exactly like the letter Pa in the Tamil language. So this Pituitary Fossa is also known as Sella Tusisa in the Latin language, and in the Latin language this means the sanctum sanctorium of the Greek or Roman temples. You can take that as a Karuvarai in Tamil language. So if you look at the Jnana Sabai, Valalar has when we go into the temple during the Pusam dates, you can see the Jodi during the Jodi Darisanam. Underneath the Jodi, Valalar has built a structure very similar to this Pagara Vari, and there Valalar has converted the liquid form of mercury and into a solid form and place it in that Pagara Vari to energize and charge the Jnana Sabai. So inside this Pituitary Fossa, you find a very interesting structure known as the Pituitary Gland. And this Pituitary Gland has got anterior part and a posterior part. This is called a master gland in our neuroendocrine system. Basically, almost all the endocrine organs in our body is controlled by this small gland, which is found in the Pituitary Fossa, and the control of all the hormonal systems in our body is so intricately controlled by a positive and negative feedback mechanism. For example, the Pituitary gland will secrete a hormone known as thyroid stimulating hormone, which will cause the thyroid hormone to secrete thyroid hormone, and when the thyroid hormone in our body rises, it will have a negative control on the pituitary as well as the hypothalamus to tell the hypothalamus and the pituitary that we have enough thyroid hormone, stop sending more TSH. So it's a very nice negative feedback mechanism. You not only see it for thyroid gland, but also for the adrenals, where the glucocorticoids, and the ovaries, the testes for the secretion of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and various other hormones that you find in our body. So this master gland is found within this pituitary fossa, and it has control of the entire system, mechanism, physiology in the human body. Next, we're going to look at a few other things that is very much related to the Sanmargam principles. Before that, we need to have a rough orientation of the parts of our brain. This is a diagrammatic representation of our brain, which has got many sections. The interesting thing about brain and what we need to know is certain specific areas of our brain control certain specific functions in our body. For example, the frontal area of bone is very important in the evolution of the human being, or the Homo sapiens, as we will see shortly. This is the area of the bone, of the brain that is crucial for our behavior, our ability to make decisions, ability to show love and compassion, and also our personality. There are other areas. For example, the back of the head is known as the occipital area. Here is the area for our vision. Another important area which we will discuss shortly is also the Broca area, which is the speech area. Speech being one of the most, is exclusively found only in humans, not seen in other life form, even in mammals. This is a motor area, which is important for movement of our limbs. So as we know, the right side of your brain will control the left side of our brain, and the opposite. Okay, this is another diagrammatic representation of our brain, which can be classified into the forebrain, the midbrain, which is the middle part, and the hindbrain. It also can be classified according to the regions. This is the frontal, this is the parietal, temporal, occipital, and this is the cerebellum. This is the area of the brain that controls the balance of our body and proprioception. Okay, next we are going to look at a concept that is very important. This is actually looking at the brain in the point of view of evolution. The brain can be divided into three parts. The first part is actually what is known as the reptilian brain. This is a part of the brain which includes the brain stem and also the spinal cord. This is followed by the limbic system of our brain, which is known as the mammalian brain, and the highest form of our brain, which is the newest development of our brain, which is known as the prefrontal area, or the human brain. We're going to look at this again and again, how this prefrontal area is so important in human behavior. We're also going to look at the limbic system in detail, but I'm just going to describe about the reptilian brain at this juncture. Reptilian brain is a very primitive brain, a very old part of our brain. The function of this brain is mostly for survival. You can look at the reptiles, which do not have higher modalities of brain functions. You cannot reason. So their main function is for survival, to find food, for sexual purposes, and also protect itself from danger. So for example, this part of the brain is concerned to protect. For example, if you're accidentally going to touch a hot plate, your hands will be quickly withdrawn. So this is a function of this reptilian brain, which acts by reflex. That means it doesn't have any, the action is involve only the spinal cord and does not involve the higher centers in the brain. Next, we're going to look at the limbic system, or the mammalian brain. This limbic system is made up of complex structures, which includes the thalamus, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and sometimes the olfactory nerve, the nerve that is for the sense of smell, may or may not be included as part of this limbic system. And this part of the brain is important for the behavioral changes, behavioral control of the human. All the emotions such as fear, hunger, anger, sexual behavior is controlled by this limbic system, as well as the learning and memory is also related to this limbic system. So as far as memory is concerned, the limbic system, it is controlled by the hippocampus. There are two types of memory, short-term and long-term memory. So when we look at an object, for example, a ruler, the signals from the retina will travel to an area of the limbic system known as the thalamus. And here, these nerves are known as nerve fibers will join to another set of nerve fibers, and the junction between these nerve fibers are known as synapses. And these synapses actually occur in this thalamus region, and this thalamus region being very closely related to the limbic system. So it is a hippocampus which stores all memories of our in the past are stored in this hippocampus. So if we see an object, the limbic system compares it with our previous experience, and by our previous experience only we are able to identify what is the object that we are looking at. So this thalamus is an area for relay of the nerve fibers that come from all the five senses, including from the hearing, the vision. Let me correct myself. The nerve fibers from the nose does not go through this thalamus. It goes directly into the brain, and that is it does not have any synapse at all. So the other four senses will go through the synapse, and by this thalamus being part of the limbic system, all the inputs that come from the sense organs will be processed and by this limbic system. So how is this limbic system related to Sutta Sanmargam? That will be your next question. So as I've said earlier, our emotions such as fear, anger, all these are generated and controlled by this limbic system. This is considered an old part of our brain, as I've said earlier, the newer part of our brain being prefrontal cortex. So this part of our brain, you can say it is rather animalistic in a certain aspect. This part of the brain was created for human through evolution to protect ourselves mainly from danger. So if, for example, if we are stimulated by a sight of a snake or a bear, for example, so that will stimulate the limbic system. It will activate the hypothalamus, and if you remember the hypothalamus and the pituitary, which we saw earlier, the hypothalamus will trigger the autonomic system in our brain. The autonomic system, especially the sympathetic nervous system, is important for fight and flight. That means, for example, if we are approached by a bear, at that moment we have to decide whether we're going to fight the bear or we're going to escape from that area. So the sympathetic nervous system will generate enough energy in our body either to fight or run away from the bear. What it will do is actually it will increase our heart rate. It will make our heart pump harder. It will increase our respiratory rate, and it give us a tremendous adrenaline rush and give us the energy to fight or fight from that situation. So this is the function of the sympathetic nervous system, and is triggered by this limbic system. So in evolution, mankind was given this limbic system to protect itself. But however, in our setting today, the need for this limbic system is becoming less and less. However, we are unable to control this limbic system, and we still show emotions such as fear, anger, and extreme or unusual sexual behavior. So it is a part of Sutta Sanmargam. If you look at Vallal Peruman, he has given a set of disciplines, which is known as the discipline of the mind and also the five senses, Indriya Karana Olukangal. So a lot of these Olukangal disciplines which is given by Vallalar is related to the limbic system, and we're just going to look at some of them. Vallalar says that we have to have fear in our body must be nil. When he talks about our body, Vallalar says that there are four things that we must avoid, and they cause destruction to our body in terms of wastage of energy, which is known as the Namme Nastam Seibave Nange. He lists fear, food, sex, and also sleep. And as I've said to you just now, during the sympathetic adrenaline rush, you can see how much our heart rate goes up, respiratory rate goes up. So a lot of energy is spent and wasted during the times of fear and also anger. So this is why Valala says that fear must be nil in our body, and at all times we must control anger. We must not have hatred. We must not have anger towards anyone. In terms of sexual behavior, in Sutta Sanmarga, there gives extreme importance to preservation of the sexual fluids, which includes for men the semen. So Valala restricts the sexual intercourse and says that in a normal person, sexual intercourse should be 1 in 16 days. In terms of food, he says that this is the main reason our body undergoes destruction, and we develop all kinds of diseases is mainly due to our food. He puts food above all the other 4 that I mentioned above, and so when it comes to the discipline of food consumption, whenever we consume food, Valala says that we only have to eat half amount of the amount of food that we usually take, and we shouldn't become slaves to our taste buds. Next, Valala also says that we need to be joyful at all times. We shouldn't be in a stress situation all the time. I think this is a major problem in our modernized and mechanical world that we live in today. We are constantly in a rat race, always trying to meet deadlines, always trying to earn more money, and all this causes a lot of wastage to all the energy in our body, and the way that happens is through what is known as the hypothalamus adrenal axis. When our body is stressed, it triggers the adrenal glands, which is found on the top of the kidneys, to secrete a hormone known as cortisol. This is actually a good hormone. It is meant to make us deal with stress. So actually what the hormone does, it actually provides us energy to deal with stress. For example, you need to, you have a deadline, you have to do a presentation. So that amount of stress, little amount of stress is actually necessary to be able to meet your deadline and perform. However, when this anxiety or the stress is prolonged, so you can see all the ill effects that it can cause. It can cause anxiety and depression. It can cause weakening of your immune system. It can cause a heart disease like atherosclerosis and heart attack. It can cause high blood pressure. So this is where Sutta Sanmargam is very important. Vallal Peruman stressed that we should always, like I said earlier, be stress-free, always meditate, and always keep our attention in the third eye. And this is what we're going to look at shortly, what is known as the third eye, and how putting our attention in the third eye is going to help us relieve from all this stress, and also reduce the action of the limbic system, which is so damaging to our body. Before we go there, I just would like to share another concept. We looked at the Jnana Sabay, how it is made up of the 8 bones. There's another peculiar structure Vallala has constructed on the left-hand corner of the Jnana Sabay. Outside the Jnana Sabay, this is known as the Eluvar Medai. Eluvar Medai is, I would relate it to the as we looked earlier, the Broca area or the speech area of our brain, which is also found on the left side of our brain. This it is an important evolutionary change that is seen only in humankind. If you look at all the other mammals, they can make sounds, but they cannot speak to one another. There is no speech. The speech is only seen in humans, and this Broca area is found on the left side of our brain. And I'm talking about a right-hand dominant person. It will be on the left side of the brain. If you are left-handed, however, this Broca area will be on your right side of the brain. But majority of us are right-handed, so this Broca area is usually 90% of the time found on the left side of our brain. So this Eluvar Mede is important because Valalar talks about resurrection of the dead. We're not concerned so much about resurrection of the dead here, but it is important in the concept of Sanmargam because we want to achieve deathlessness. So if you look at the evolution of mankind, you can see this is a skull bone of a Neanderthal, and this is a skull bone of a Homo sapien. This is a modern man. So you can look at a few features are very distinctive. You can see the front part of the bone. This is known as the frontal cortex. It is enlarged in Homo sapien, whereas it's actually very shallow in the Homo neanderthals. And you can see the jaw is another distinctive feature. You can see that the jaw, it is small in Homo sapiens, whereas it is large in the Homo neanderthals. So it is not surprising because of the development of the prefrontal cortex, the Homo sapiens were able to outlive the Homo neanderthals. And it's said that both of them actually existed during the same time. But however, scientists are not able to identify why the Neanderthals extincted, but we can see that probably they did not have speech, and they were probably hunters and meat eaters, whereas the Homo sapiens survived because of development of the prefrontal cortex, and they were able to reason, they had intellect, they were able to show love and compassion, and most importantly, they were able to grow crops and became farmers. And if you look at the jaw structure and our teeth structure, it is ideal for a plant-eating being rather than a hunter or a meat-eating being. So evolution has chosen the Homo sapiens to become the only existing human species on this earth, and he has the ability of speech, and this is very much related to what Valalar is constructed here as the Eluvar Mede. As you know, the evolution of mankind, initially they walked in, they were four-legged. And it is when the quadrupedal human became bipedal, that is when they developed the prefrontal cortex and also the Broca area of the brain. And that is why in the Tamil language, Eluvar means, Eluvadu means to stand up. So it is when the humans stood up that they developed the ability to speak. And this is when they start, they have the ability to go to the next step of evolution. That means from the sixth sense to the seventh sense, which is the Elam Arivu, or the God's Arivu, and attain a life of deathlessness, which is the main principle of Sutta Sanmargam. Next, we are going to look at another very interesting and structure, which is known as the pineal gland, or very famously known as the third eye. Our suttas have given a identification tool to identify the location of this gland in our body. If we draw a line from the vertex of our skull towards the uvula of our tongue, and another line extending from the place where we put the pottu, or the third eye, backwards to the occipital ridge of our skull, both these lines will meet at a place which is actually the pineal gland. This pineal gland is found at the roof of the third ventricle of our brain, and it is actually a mysterious gland, and it holds many secrets. And even during the ancient times, as we will see shortly, people were very mystified by this gland. So again, this is a MRI of our brain showing the two lines, and they transect at a point which is the pineal gland, or known as the third eye. So as I've said earlier, the ancient also realized, the ancient civilizations of the world also realized the importance of the pineal gland. The name pineal gland comes from the word pine cone, because the appearance of the gland, it looks like the pine cone. So as you can see, this is the staff held by Pope. You can see there is a pine cone there. Even found in the Mesopotamian civilization, these are the Assyrian gods holding a structure which looks like the pine cone. So we can see that the ancient civilization knew about this existence of the pineal gland and called it the third eye. And if you look at the very primitive living creatures, like for example lizards, this third eye was actually outside of their body. As you can see, it looked exactly like the third eye. However, in humans, the pineal gland is no longer found on the exterior surface. It has gone into the middle of the brain, at the roof of the third ventricle. So it no longer is able to sense the light because it's not in the exterior. So it needs to be connected to the light by other nerves, right? So this is when we come to an interesting concept which is revealed by Vallalaar. He says this pineal gland could be this represented as the Sanmargam flag. Vallalaar says that there is a nerve connecting from our navel up to a cartilage which is hanging in our brain, and there are two nerves, one is ascending and one is descending. So I try and connect this concept with the third eye, and they have made scientific discoveries about the connection between our retina of our eye and also this pineal gland. It is quite interesting that the photosensitive, when the light hits the retina of the eye, the signal is sent to a nucleus known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. This is the biological clock in our body. Alright, so there is a descending fibers coming out of this nucleus, going down the spinal cord, and then going upwards again to the pineal gland. So the signal of light from the retina is sent to the pineal gland through this pathway, and incidentally it resembles the nadis that is revealed by Vallal Peruman, the descending and also the ascending nadis. So Vallalaar has come in this 19th century to tell us what the ancients knew, and over the times we have forgotten the importance of the pineal gland and the importance for the spiritual development of a person. So we look at the function of the pineal gland and how it is related to spirituality. The main function of the pineal gland is to secrete a hormone known as melatonin. And melatonin, it is the hormone that is important for our circadian rhythm. That means the sleep-wake cycle in our body is determined by this hormone, melatonin. When there is daylight, for example, when the sun rises, the level of melatonin in our body will decrease gradually, and during sunset around 6 to 7 p.m. The level of melatonin in our body will slowly rise and attain a peak usually around 2 to 4 a.m. Alright, this is a time where the melatonin level is highest in our body, and this is a time when we will have the deepest sleep and the best time to rest in our body. As the sun rises, slowly the level of melatonin will decrease in our body and we will awaken. So the melatonin and the pineal gland are very important, very crucial in our body as in the outside there is the sunrise and sunset, the sun and the moon. The similar changes are happening in our body. The awakening and the sleep-wake cycle is controlled by this pineal gland by secretion of melatonin. So what we can see here is the best amount, the peak amount of melatonin is seen during these hours 2 to 4 a.m. and we can get complete rest during this period. Another interesting thing is this graph shows us that the melatonin secretion actually decreases in our body as we age. The reason the melatonin secretion decreases as we age is because of calcification of the pineal gland. So as you find, this is the reason why as we grow older, our sleep-wake cycle is always disrupted, and the elderly usually find it difficult to go to sleep. So now there's a lot of research going on how to prevent the calcification of the pineal gland, and because of interest of time, we are not able to see those today. But the take-home message I can give you is here is the sleep, the peak of melatonin is usually about only 1 to 2 hours. And Valalar says that if we sleep for about 1 hour a day, if we are able to do that, I'm not suggesting that you go and try it. You can live for 1,000 years. This is one of the quotations Valalar has given in the Urenade Pagadi or prose writing of Tiruvarupa. I'm sure many of you have read that. So it is my hypothesis that if we sleep during the peak of the melatonin secretion, we are able to get the enough rest and our body can rejuvenate itself, and we can carry out our daily activities thereafter. Next concept is this melatonin is not only involved in the sleep-wake cycle, it is also a very strong antioxidant, anti-aging, and also anti-cancer agent. They have seen that if they were to feed, this is a lab experiment, I'm sorry, they have used mice and they're given carcinogens to rats, and whenever they give the carcinogens to the rats at night, they found that there's less chance of the rat developing cancer. So it is postulated that the high melatonin secretion at night protects the rats from getting cancer. They have also found that there is higher incidence of breast cancer, for example, in shift workers, women who worked at night. They disrupted their sleep-wake cycle, they disrupted their melatonin secretion, they have higher chance of getting cancer of the breast. So the message here is we should try our best to make sure that the sleep-wake cycle and the melatonin secretion in our body is in balance all the time. So the main problem we see today is the influence of many of the devices like laptops, computers. We are using a lot of these devices, and the blue ray that comes out from these devices actually suppress the melatonin secretion, and this is why we are having difficulty to sleep, and we are undergoing a lot of stress. So one of the suggestion is to use blue filtered lenses when you're using these devices. Yeah, because they found that the wavelength found in the blue light is the one that is able to suppress the pineal gland the most. Okay, next we can look, there is correlation between the melatonin secretion and the brain waves in our body. As you can see, the frequency of our brain waves can go on from gamma, beta, and as it reduces, it goes to theta and delta. So the importance of this is when our melatonin secretion is high, example, in the early morning hours before the sun rises, the brain waves are actually calm, right? We don't have much thoughts in our body. The waves will be alpha waves, which is around 8 to 13 hertz or lower. So this is an excellent time for us to do meditation. So this is why Valalar asks us to awaken early before sunrise, and that is a perfect time. Our mind is calm and we can do meditation. Next, there is a relationship between the melatonin secretion, the circadian rhythm, and also the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in our body. For example, you can see the Kapha dominance starts around 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. So this is why we need to awaken before 6 a.m. Before the sunrise, or else our body will become imbalanced. The Kapha in our body will become higher, and we will have a lot of phlegm and nasal and respiratory discharge. So to maintain a balance of all these Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in our body, we need to awaken early in the morning before the sun rises. And Valalar gives very importance to this Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and in fact he calls the three dosas as the actual owners of our body, and we are actually tenants in our body. So the rent that we pay to the landlord or the owner of body, which is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, is the food that we eat. So it is important to eat the various types of food by knowing the Vata, Pitta, Kapha content of this food. And first of all, you need to know which is the dosa that is predominant in our body, and for example, if we are a Pitta dominant or Vata dominant person, and we have to select our food accordingly. Only in that situation we are able to keep these three dosas in balance. So the pineal gland is also mystical and very interesting because they have recent discoveries. They found things like microcyte, calcite crystals in the pineal gland, and also postulated that this pineal gland could secrete a substance known as DMT, which is a very potent psychedelic substance. Okay, finally, we will just look at some concepts which are important in Sutta Sanmargam, which is Parobagaram or Jiva Karunyam, and how that is related to our brain. So if you look at our brain, it's actually a bunch of nerves or neurons, and these neurons speak to one another at junctions, which is known as synapses. And at this synapses, one neuron speaks to another neuron through transmission of what is known as neuron transmitters. So these neuron transmitters can actually depress the function of another neuron or can excite another neuron. So there are many neuron transmitters in our brain. For the purpose of this lecture, we're just going to talk about two of them. One is oxytocin, and the other is dopamine. So it is the ultimate principle of Sutta Sanmargam is actually the practice of Jiva Karunyam, which is the act of showing love and compassion when one living being, be it an animal, be it an ant, be it a snake, is suffering from hunger, from thirst. It is the duty of, it is our duty to elevate those suffering, and this act is known as the act of Jiva Karunyam. And Valalar says that Jiva Karunyam me Kadavul Valipadu. That means Jiva Karunyam is a form of God worship, and God worship is Jiva Karunyam, and full stop. That means he's saying the best form of, or the only form of God worship is the form of Jiva Karunyam, which is the act of showing love and compassion. So let's see how this Jiva Karunyam brings about chemical changes in our brain. It is through the secretion of the dopamine in the prefrontal cortex. This is known as the brain reward pathway. Unfortunately, they studied this pathway when they looked at drug addiction. When somebody is addicted to drugs, and when they studied, they found this pathway, and it is through the secretion of dopamine when they took those drugs. What triggered them to keep on taking those drugs is the formation of dopamine in the prefrontal cortex. So I've used the same model to look at Jiva Karunyam. When we do Jiva Karunyam, I postulate that the prefrontal cortex, there is secretion of dopamine, and the dopamine is the one that gives us the good. That gives us the good feeling when we do the act of Jiva Karunyam. We can call it Anma Urukam in Tamil, or we can call it melting of the soul. So it is the same. It is the formation of this dopamine that makes us feel good, and we want to do the Jiva Karunyam, act of Jiva Karunyam again and again. And the next hormone that we're going to discuss is oxytocin. This is secreted by, as we saw, it is secreted by the pituitary gland. This hormone is a very important hormone during pregnancy and also after delivery. It is secreted. When it's secreted, it creates a bonding between the mother and the child. The oxytocin is important for the ejection of the breast milk to feed the child, and also important for contraction of the uterus after the delivery to prevent bleeding, postpartum bleeding. So this oxytocin is known as a love hormone. It is not only secreted in women, it's also secreted in men or in males. For example, when a father picks up his child, even the oxytocin is secreted in this person. So in Sutta Sanmarga practice, Valala talks about Anmaneyam. So we should show love and compassion to all the living beings in this world. And when we do that, there is secretion of this oxytocin in our brain. That is so crucial for mankind. Another important action of this oxytocin is, if you look at the prefrontal cortex and the hypothalamus, they are above the limbic system. So when there is secretion of oxytocin, it is able to suppress the function of the limbic system. The limbic system, as we looked earlier, it is an area where it modulates our anger, our fear. So when we have formation of hormones, feel-good hormones like oxytocin and dopamine, it will suppress the function of the limbic system. Okay, finally, I just want to share the concept of changes that's in our brain, which is called as, let's see. Sorry, something wrong with this slide. Plasticity of our brain, right? This concept is, we may wonder if when we do Jiva Karunyam, we feel good for temporarily. So how this temporary change is going to bring about permanent change in our body. So scientists have discovered that when we do certain activities repeatedly, they can bring about permanent change in our body, in our brain. So temporary changes in our brain is some things like increase in brain waves, blood flow to certain area of our brain, or oxygen consumption. But lasting changes in our brain is a very interesting concept known as brain plasticity. This is when our thought itself can actually, in the long run, change the morphology or the structure of our brain. This brings us to the concept of neurons that wire together. Why I say that is because if we were to do, for example, an act of Jiva Karunyam repeatedly, this will strengthen the synapses in our brain, and also we can form new synapses in our brain. This is the concept of brain plasticity. So what they have done in research is they found certain parts of our brain can actually thicken. For example, a good example is a cab driver who for example, a cab driver, when he takes his passenger to many places, they found that the hippocampus area, which we looked at earlier, which is important for memory, becomes thickened. So why I'm saying this is, it is my hypothesis that when we do certain things repeatedly, like Jiva Karunyam, in the long run, it is going to bring about some permanent changes in our brain, right? And this is why Valalar, when he sang the 28 songs known as Jnana Sariyai, he starts by saying Niningdu, right? So he is asking us to constantly do this Jiva Karunyam, or constantly meditate and put our concentration in the pineal gland or the third eye. And this, in the long run, will bring about brain plasticity or permanent changes in our brain. So finally, I would like to end my lecture by giving you some take-home messages. The third eye is very important in Sutta Sanmargam, and we have connected the third eye to the pineal gland, and we have seen the importance of the pineal gland in terms of the sleep-wake cycle, the circadian rhythm, and also importance during meditation. So you have to, Valalar says that we have to constantly put our concentration in the third eye. Always keep a check on the limbic system. You must realize that the anger, the fear are going to cause harm to our body. You must reset and our circadian rhythm, which is now all disarray because our lifestyle changes, and enhance the function of our pineal gland, which is slowly getting calcified. As I've said earlier, we have to take steps to prevent the calcification of this pineal gland. And also look at your body, and from the aspect of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. I didn't have much time to illustrate this, but you can look it up yourself, and how it is related to the circadian rhythm, and it is very strongly related to the food intake, and we have always been mindful of our food. And finally, the concept of Jiva Karunyam, it is the ultimate message Valalar was sent to this world. It is the 199th celebration of his birth, and his main message that he came to this world to deliver was the message of love and compassion, or Jiva Karunyam. And remember that it can rewire and bring about permanent changes in your brain, as we saw earlier. Finally, I put this slide up as a reminder. You all are in the United States, and you must be aware that a lot of research is going on about the brain, and a lot of this research are funded by Buddhist organizations. I believe Dalai Lama himself funds many of these researchers. It is our desire that we also in the future have a place where we can do research about Sanmargam, and currently there is work going on to establish a Valalar Studies Chair at Florida International University, and we are at the moment the work has already been initiated, and right now we are trying to make a syllabus for these studies, and we hope by the time we celebrate the 200th incarnation day or birthday of Valal Peruman, this Valalar chair will already be running. So those who are interested may contact the person in charge, who is Professor Dr. Madi from Florida International University, at this email. Finally, I would like to invite all those present today in this session to the Malaysian Valalar Varuvika Uttanal celebration, which will be held online on the 13th of November 2021. I end my speech again by thanking the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and I pray that all of you receive the blessing of Valalar on this auspicious celebration. Arupparanjodi, Arupparanjodi, Taniparum Karunai, Arupparanjodi, Vallal Malaradi, Valga Valga, Ella Uirgalum Inputru Valga. I thank you again.